Thank you, Rachel. I now start my speech for my chat out of breath. That's fantastic. I'm going to change the mood slightly. I'm sorry about that in some ways. So I'd like to introduce you to a friend of mine, and I would really like you to close your eyes. Don't fall asleep after all that exercise, but if you could close your eyes and concentrate on the gentleman I'm just about to introduce you to. Trust me, please close your eyes. I'd like to introduce you to Robert. He's early 40. He was diagnosed with primary progressive MS in his early 30s. He's now trapped in a body that doesn't work for him. He is in a wheelchair from the moment he gets up to the moment he's put to bed. The carers come in 4 times a day. He gets up at about 9 o'clock and he goes to bed at 6 o'clock in the evening. In that time, he's in his wheelchair all day. This is July and it's very, very hot outside. He is sitting in his wheelchair waiting for his social worker to arrive, and he is perspiring down back. And his head is very itchy because he's not had a shower for about 3 weeks. The carers come in, but because of time restraints, they're only in for 10 or 15 minutes sometimes. Quick bed bath, wash and up. Microwave is pinged and some porridge is put in front of him. Sometimes it's too hot and the carers don't have time to actually meal assist him his breakfast, so it stays there until 12 o'clock until the next carers come in. He lives by himself. He was married with 2 children, and when he was diagnosed, they were the archetypal, lovely family. He had a wonderful job, beautiful wife, 2 lovely children, and their life was mapped out. Unfortunately, MS arrived to join the party, and his family disintegrated. His wife didn't sign up for this. He had 3 years of rapid degeneration. High dependency happened very quickly, and she struggled to cope. She had to go back to work full time because he was no longer working. They had 2 children, and unfortunately the stress of caring caused depression for her, and the stress of living was too much for her. She fell into the trap of a lot of carers in the fact that she either, a lot of carers fall into abuse of drugs, alcohol or food, and she fell into the trap of, once Robert was in bed and the children were in bed, opening a bottle or 2 of wine, and became morbidly obese. They realised that this couldn't carry on because if anything happened to her, there was nobody there to look after the children. So they decided to separate, and so much so that he doesn't really see her or the children. For the children, it's not cool to bring anybody home from school if your dad's in a wheelchair. You can't understand what he's saying. He's dribbling and he smells of pee. And that's not really very cool for the kids. And Robert quite philosophically understood that. He spent his day by himself most of the time. The friends that they did have, who used to come in on a regular basis, have one by one dropped off. And now he's only got 1 or 2 people that come and see him, apart from his carers. And sometimes the carers don't turn up because there's issues within the care agency. And it makes a very socially isolated situation, and actually quality of life isn't there. However, there's one thing. 3 years ago, his social worker, who has been very proactive, managed to acquire funding for him to visit Leuchie House over Christmas and New Year. Christmas and New Year is a very difficult time for people with high dependency because A, they don't want to intrude on other people's family, but also their own carers need time off as well, and it's very haphazard whether the care will arrive or not, especially over the festive season. So the social worker said, I think it'd be really good if we could get you to Leuchie because at least you will get that care. So he came to Leuchie for the first time that Christmas. That was 3 years ago, and immediately he met like-minded people, same level of dependency. They could interact. They had a lot of fun together. The activities and the entertainments were planned. He could decide if he wanted to go to the pantomime, if he could go to the cinema, or he could go up to the Christmas market, or if he just wanted to stay at Leuchie House and just listen to the children that came in from local schools to sing carols, or the local dramatic society who came in to do a Christmas carol or whatever. But the choice was there. He also had the choice of when he went to bed and when he got up. He had the choice of what he could choose to eat. He also had a load of volunteers that would come in, specially trained to do meal assist. So there was no rush, and he could actually savour having dinner again, which he had not done for a long, long time. He was showered on a daily basis. He had access to the Leuchie MOT, as we call it, which is where we fully assess our guests' physical and emotional requirements and we refer back to the community. He got access to physiotherapy, he got pressure mapped. We looked at his drugs to see if they were the right things for him now. His quality of life had changed because he had this one thing to look forward to every year. Anyway, he's waiting for his social worker to arrive, and she does arrive, and she says to him, Robert, I've got some really good news and some bad news. I've managed to get funding for the 2 weeks at Leuchie over Christmas and New Year. The bad news is that Leuchie is going to be closed by then, and it's closing in the beginning of December, and you will not be able to go to Leuchie for Christmas. And that was the reality of the situation at that time. So at that time I was part of a team of people that worked for the MS Society, and part of my remit was the respite strategy. And we knew what it meant to 500 people to come to Leuchie on a regular basis, not just for them, but for their carers and their children and the extended family. We were all absolutely devastated because we knew the implications of what this would bring. So we asked the MS Society to try and change their mind, and they said no. So we started the Save Leuchie campaign to try and orchestrate enough public interest that would try and make the MS Society change their mind. We did very well. I mean, there was articles in The Guardian, there was articles in Private Eye, there was debates in Parliament, questions at Westminster, but they still didn't change their mind. However, we were due to close at the beginning of December, and 5 days before we were due to close, the Chief Exec of MS Society asked to meet me at Edinburgh Airport, met him, and he said, Mairi, we're considering opening it for keeping Leuchie open for another few months to see if you can set up as an independent charity. So we'll give it, say, 3 months or something. And I said, well, it's kind of something that we'd have liked to have known a good few months ago, because we have absolutely no money, we've got no bookings, and we're about to close. And he said, well, I'll give you some time, see how you get on. So off we went. That was the Monday. On the Tuesday I went to the staff, bearing in mind the staff had jobs to go to, they had redundancy money, and I said to them at the beginning, I'd like to go for this. I know it's a huge risk, but I would really like if some of you could stay with me. And such was the commitment and the passion and the values, and I'll come back to that later. But we talked about the tribe early on. The Leuchie tribe were so committed to what we do, 75% of the staff stayed with me. However, we had to pay that staff, and we had no money whatsoever. So my talk today is going to be about vision and values, commitment and passion, who to bring with you, who are your partners going to be. Don't be afraid to ask, and stay true to those values. And I'm going to come back to these as I tell you the story. So there we were, we said we'd go for it, and we had absolutely no money, but because we all had this vision and this passion of what we wanted to do, it was very easy to transfer that into an ask, but we didn't ask, if you know what I mean. We just said, this is what we'd really like to do, we need help. And it was amazing the amount of help that we got, from anything from 50p, £5, £500, 5,000, and in one aspect, one lady came up and said, oh, I'll give you 50, and I thought, oh, I thought she might give me a bit more than that, she meant 50,000. And we got no money from the Scottish Government. It was a really difficult time. However, we managed to set up, and we raised just about under 600,000 in those few months, and we launched our new charity on the 4th of July, very, very carefully chosen date, and we set up on the 4th of July. At that time, I'd literally just registered with the care inspector that morning. Oscar had come through the day before. The transfer agreement with the MS Society hadn't been signed, and the lease had not been negotiated with the family, but we were not letting that date go past. It had to be the 4th of July. The journey was not easy. We also changed the model because the vision we had was of a country house hotel specialising in long-term conditions with high dependency. Because of a genetic malformation, why should you have to accept second best and go to a care of the elderly or hospital environment for respite? And how could the carers go away and enjoy a well-earned rest or break, knowing that their loved one was miserable where they were? So having this holiday environment meant that the carers had a wonderful time because their loved one was having a wonderful time. That was a win-win situation for us. However, it was very easy to get despondent because the mountain was so huge in front of us. We were having to raise at least 1.2 million every year. So the fact we raised 600 to set up was only the first step. And because people had been so generous at first, we couldn't go back for at least another 2 or 3 years. So every year, every 1st of January, because our year was January to December, every 1st of January, everybody was out having a great time. I'm thinking, where am I going to get it this year? Where am I going to get this money? The staff were completely committed, but we changed the model to all long-term conditions. It was MS, MND, Parkinson's, stroke. So the staff, and it was 4, 7 or 11 nights, very complicated model. When you think of all the knowledge and everything that we needed to have, the care plans, the drugs, everything for every guest coming. But we wanted to make sure that we had extended our customer base, partly for the business, but also because we wanted to have more people to have access to this unique model that we had. Very much a social model. Food is fantastic, fun. It's a very happy place. It's not a sad place. You think it would be, but because everybody was so united in making the best of the time, it made it much easier. So when we come back to talking about values, and that 75% of the staff stayed with me, we all had that common value and that commitment that brought us through the first stage. However, it was very difficult for the staff and there was burnout. It was very difficult for everybody because, money was paramount, but we also wanted to provide a really good service. Care Inspectorate didn't really understand our model. We weren't a care home. And the complexity of the model was really difficult to understand. However, we went through quite a few details with that. But the big thing for us was the vision. We were all united as a tribe about the vision of what we wanted to achieve. And also, when we talk about the social aspect, social leadership, which was brought up earlier on this morning, it was very much about that. There was very open communication. The staff knew that I was behind the Save Leuchie campaign. They knew that I was employed by the MS Society. That could have been so easy for them to have just picked up the phone and said it was Mairi's, but they didn't. We were so united in what we wanted to do. It was very important we had that authenticity together and that transparency together. So they knew when things were going well with the Save Leuchie campaign, and they knew when it wasn't. So we've talked about the vision, we've talked about the values, we've talked about the passion and the commitment that even when things were going really badly and the staff were really affected by the amount of hours, extra hours that they were working, they still stayed with me, which I think is also vitally important. One of the major things is that we couldn't have done it ourselves. We talked about the collaborations. Very quickly, I realised, what the hell I'd done, but also, I couldn't do this by myself. Now, the first partners were obviously the staff, but I had to bring a board on board and an advisory board, and we set up another charity as well called the Leuchie Forever Fund that would hopefully fundraise for reserves for us, because we had no reserves. So every year, the fact that we brought it in budget, because it's a very expensive model to run, was nothing short of a miracle in itself. I was really honoured that one of the first partners that we had, apart from the staff, was QMU. Petra and Joe Goldblatt visited, and through them we got access to furniture from the Caledonian Hotel. So we immediately were turning it into this country house hotel ambience. Again, that vision that we had. We then developed a much further partnership through Brendan and others about student placement, physio placements, nursing placements. There was the whole thing. When I left, I was really hoping to have business students because of the fundraising aspect that we had to develop. But it was a synergy that we had, which I think is one of the most things I'm most proud of, actually. And we also had major donors. Why would they give money to us? We were just a tiny wee charity in East Lothian. So it became quite apparent that we had to get right out there as quickly as possible. So we weren't just seen as a tiny wee charity in East Lothian, we were a national respite centre. So we went from having no bookings to nothing. Between that and the next 7 years, we were doing over 6,000 respite nights a year for 35 different conditions from 28 local authorities in Scotland. So yes, we could call ourselves National Respite Centre. Again, that vision, but that doesn't happen, all the time. It brought its own risks with it. professionally, because we were expanding and we were so thin on the ground, the risks with added legislation, etc., were coming more and more to the fore, and personal risks, because we were all on danger of burnout, not just the staff, but the management as well. So that is a hard one to, when you see your staff giving their absolute utmost, and you thank them for it, but you also feel incredibly guilty that you're putting them through it. So there was a whole emotion around there, but there was a lot of transparency, and I have to say, what we talked about earlier on, a lot of love, not just for the guests, but between the staff as well. Major donors, I never had to ask them for money. I just told them the story of how we got here, and they gave us money. One major donor said, I'll give you this amount of Scottish Government match funds, and the Scottish Government did. It took 2 years of them to do it, but they did do it. And because of that, we had a bit of certainty, or more certainty. Politicians, they were fantastic. I immediately went to them when we were doing the Save Leuchie campaign, and they had visited Leuchie, a lot of them had already visited Leuchie, and they immediately saw the bereavement aspect of losing service. Not just for the guests, but actually for NHS as well, because we were saving NHS a lot of money. They knew that we were a very robust service, and for me, the model should have been replicated in Glasgow and Aberdeen. We shouldn't just have Leuchie and East Lothian, we should have all over Scotland, because it is mopping up all the issues that long-term conditions are not being able to be sorted out in the community just now, until integration gets more mature, shall we say, less embryonic. So we had that vision, started on the partnerships. We had Stobo Castle. When I went to Stobo Castle, first of all, and I said, Steve Minnard, I want to base Leuchie on Stobo Castle, and he went, not for money, not for profit. And I said, no, we're probably going to have a deficit of $1 million. He said, you're absolutely crazy. And I said, but I really want to bring your managers down, stay overnight, let them see what Stobo does. And that just, it made managers click straight away about what we were trying to achieve. The Caledonian were fantastic with all the furniture we got. The Balmoral, because we had this hospitality aspect, it was, health and social care, but with hospitality, the Balmoral took us on as we got furniture, obviously, and sort of furnishings, but they took us on as a model of how they can help, not just for money, marketing help. Our staff got trained by housekeeping, our staff got trained by reception. So if I come back to let's see, if you think you've nailed it, you failed it, never give up. If you think you've done it, never be complacent, because there's always something coming around the corner, and be prepared for that plan A, B, and C. Stick to your values, and do not be afraid to ask. That's a big one. Never don't think, oh, I can't ask that person. You can, they can only say no. Thank you.